Let's welcome Elizabeth Clark Libert to the Black and White Photography Podcast. Elizabeth's first framed photographs from her project, Passing Eden, and as she tells me, that project may change, but we'll talk about that, was completed in July at the Foley Gallery in New York City. Exposure 2021, the 25th annual PRC juried exhibition curated by Chris Graves is now at the Mary Cosgrove Dolphin Gallery at Worcester State University, and that's running from July 9th to August 20th. So let's talk about a lot of Elizabeth's work. I think you're going to really be very impressed. Elizabeth and I were in an online class, I would say probably about 2 months ago or 3 months ago. I kidded her. I said she was a sleeper because
it was longer ago too. I feel like it was the best all of 2020. So it's been a little while.
So let's talk. I've got a lot of the images I'm sure the audience is going to want to see. Let's talk about the project, and it really is a project, Passing Eden. I've seen some of the images before, but obviously the audience hasn't. But let's talk about the project and how it all got started and where you're going from here.
All right, sounds good.
So let me bring one of the images up, Elizabeth. There we go. I thought that was great. Let's talk about, because how I've sequenced these is I've got all of the boys in one sequence, and then I've got some of the flower pictures or shrubs sort of at the end. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Super. So let's talk about the project. Let's talk. What made you do this?
So really it was observing my boys playing, and that they were really drawn to some of this more stereotypical physical boy play, if you will. And, there's the term boys will be boys. And I started to realize it was somewhat applicable to my sons, even in this day of questioning gender. But they just really started to seem drawn to, like in this photograph, my son has a toy gun. It's actually a super soaker, which is it's a water gun. And like I hadn't, for a while, I wouldn't buy them any toy guns, but their great grandmother bought some for them, and eventually they just sort of found their way into our household. And I wasn't gonna stop them from playing with it at friends' homes either, but I think just having grown up, I did have one brother, but I wasn't around this sort of boy energy that now, so I have two sons that you'll see in the work, but the two of them, as I sort of entered this young boyhood, I just started to become aware of their behavior, and I noticed that my own sort of anxiety surrounding it, and I just started to make pictures of it and them. And I should say, and I also at the same time, that was the anxiety part of it, but at the same time I also found, they're my sons, and I think that they're beautiful creatures. So I just kind of wanted to hone in on this sort of, the terminology is passing season of boyhood.
So you're you've got your Master of Fine Arts, right?
Yes.
And you have a family portrait studio. Is that correct? Or
I did have a physical space, but now I just work from home. So I have a business that I started in 2012, and okay. I had a studio space, but I still photograph people mostly at their homes or outside on location. I sort of took the practice that I had been working on in my fine art, and I applied it to the families that were my clients.
Now, when I look at the photographs, I'm not a big guy on equipment, and this vlogcast isn't an equipment thing. I think it's you can use any kind of equipment, but I notice a similarity here on these photos. For example, this one and this one over here, there's a little bit of saturation in the photos, isn't there? Is that a little bit more saturation, or not that that's bad? Go ahead.
No, I think I'm wondering. It looks weird on the screen to me. Like it doesn't look like it does on my like. I'm just wondering if the files somehow got changed in the process of sending them to you. Like,
well,
did they look like that to you? Did they look like a little like? Yeah, everything looks.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at them, the look on the and apparently that's regardless of whether they were changed when they were exchanged, but the look is all the same. It feels the same to me. In other words, and I'm assuming that's what it's a different kind of feel. It's and they all look alike. The boys, their faces are very similar from photograph to photograph as far as the exposure, and the poses that you were able to get from the boys. Tell us a little bit about what you did when you were, photographing them, or what you were thinking about.
So, I mean, these are documentary and mostly in nature, and I don't ask them to really look one way or another. So, like, especially in like an image like this, you can sort of see in the foreground, there's some branches that are soft. So I'm kind of peeking in. It's a little voyeuristic. So maybe they were aware that I was photographing them, but they really were kind of just hanging out there, dozing off. And I think also my practice with photographing families so much with my clients, I've sort of learned how to capture those moments where people are not as self-aware. So the sort of in between where they're not smiling and looking into the camera. I did, or if they are looking at the camera, it's a little bit more of a serious gaze. My kids are very used to being photographed. And I actually should say now that they're getting a little older, it might be getting harder. But I was not like saying, go sit over there and do this. It was more, if I noticed that they were doing something or playing in a certain way or in a certain light, I would run and go get my camera and try to capture it without telling them what to do so much. Occasionally I'd be like, can you go do that? Just there, like, or, somehow try to move them, or I'm trying to think of none of the pictures that are I did recently try to bribe. I was like, I'll give you a lollipop if you do this. The shoot didn't work. So the bribery doesn't work. I think it really has to be natural. So like, again, here, my younger son they were playing with these, we just had a huge windstorm and all these branches came down, these like huge branches, and they were playing. And I think I just said, George, look this way. And he like turned and boom, you get it before he starts doing anything too crazy. And
how long had you been working on this project?
So this, just out of curiosity, when you're showing me this, it's like, oh, you know what it is I'm seeing kind of your background merged with this. Like I see the bricks.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And like the red, and it's all very, but this is it not what you're seeing? You're seeing the actual image?
No, I actually see the image itself. I mean, I don't see any background or anything like that.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So sorry, repeat your question.
So the question was, number one, or more than number one, but how long did it take you to really, from start to finish on the project? And I'm not even sure if you're finished yet, but more importantly, I mean, how long has the project been going on?
So I started, some of the earliest images are in 2019, and it was early 2020 when I started to realize that there were these images of the boys that were making me a little bit uneasy and capturing like this anxiety that I have. I think also, I am there as a parent. I started to realize my sort of biggest goal is to raise two good men. And I'd written my own Me Too piece, and I started to notice that my son in one of these photos reminded me of some men that I'd had, or boys, they were younger boys that I had bad experiences with. And so I think I was like, okay, my biggest goal is to make sure that they end up being good people. But watching my boys sort of get very physical and violent and aggressive in certain images, I was just starting to notice their behavior. And that was sort of the question. That was when I realized, oh, this is something that I can make images about and sort of it's almost like therapeutic. Reflect on and sort of celebrate them, but also start to ask these questions about their nature, and what do we sort of do with that and acknowledge about it. So that's when I started to sort of grow that awareness, and then I started to be more intentional with the photographs. And so that was late. I really started to figure that out early 2020. And then COVID, the pandemic happened, and I had a lot more time with them. So I was able to really get a lot more images.
Oh, that's great.
And we took that class, and then I've really kind of been shaping it. I've photographed, I think the most recent photographs have been early summer 2021, but they really kind of slowed down at that point, and I've been much more focusing kind of on the presentation and wrapping up of the project. And
now, when you look at this photograph, I find it very unique, and in that most people wouldn't take this photograph, but there's something about the mystique of this photograph with your son, his head buried in the tree, right? Whether he's playing hide and go seek or whatever, there's a mystique about it. Like, what are your thoughts about this photograph? Because it's unusual.
Yep. So he is sort of hiding and being a little coy. And the tree, it was just this beautiful sort of sensual tree. And I think I wanted to present him as a sort of sensual being as well. And the other thing that I at first wasn't thrilled about, but came to like about this image are his shorts. They're actually pajama shorts, and they're meant to be these legs, where the top t-shirt part, he's not wearing it, but it's the top of a robot. So he's got the visual lines of these robot legs going down his legs. And then of course he has legs, and I called it limbs because I also feel like the tree, the way that it's leaning, it felt like another limb. And I think that there's this sensuality and coyness going on. And so the other part of the project is sort of just being aware of this sort of lustful and sensual response that I have to my own sons without it being sexual. It's just like, I don't know I think sensual is the word that I would use, but
yeah. Mothers and sons.
Also playful, and just, it's like, again, and we can talk more about the plants later on, but this blooming bougainvillea.
I thought this was a great one. Whoop, I got a little bit of too much fade there on this one. There we go. Okay. There we go. Yeah, this one I think is titled Sore Loser.
Yep.
Yeah, and wow. And it's what happens with the boys too. I can remember as a kid, if maybe he was playing with his brother, another friend, or whatever. But all of a sudden you're on the grass and you're not happy, right? Sort of a passing of the adult male.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and this one I love this one, Afloat. There we go. That's a beauty. Let me get this. Yeah, okay. I take it that's at some pool, but I mean there's something about it. It's the way the waves are moving in the pool. And what are your thoughts about this shot?
So I should say I do at times sort of question the pool or too much sort of man-made presence. There was the intention with at least the book that it's in this, that they're in a metaphor called Eden, but in this metaphorical Eden, I do think that there is water to swim in. So the pool, I figured it worked. But I mean, the light, him sort of basking in the light, it made me think of like imagery, like it made me think of sort of being in ecstasy and just sort of floating and enjoying yourself. And then if you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, though, my other son is sort of diving and swimming under it. He just sort of seems like a blob, but I feel like it's just slightly menacing. But at the same time, there's that levity and
okay.
That's why I liked it. So the mix of the kind of the light and this feeling of being afloat, but then the sort of darkness below that's starting to.
Is the water shot in the exhibition?
It was not,
okay.
No, but it will be in the book.
Okay, super. For the viewers, here's her son's hand holding what looks to be a little. Is that a frog or
a lizard?
A little lizard. I didn't know they had lizards out back east. I guess they do though.
We do. So half of these photos, I'd say, were taken in Florida.
Oh, okay.
We were during the shutdown, and I have tons of family there, and we spend a lot of time there as well.
Okay.
So there's this little bit of like north and south, the sort of more lush south. But
that's
definitely.
I mean, isn't that male childhood just holding a little animal gently by the looks of it, but holding this little lizard and trying to figure out what it is, and great shot. Did you have to? I take it this wasn't planned. It just sort of happened, and it was one of those happenstance shots, right?
Yep. I mean, I might have said, George, show me your lizard, but I was that day. He said that it's part of a series that I entitled Friend for a Day. He went lizard hunting and caught this lizard. Part of the reason that he caught this lizard is that it was dying. So he's like practically dead in this photo. But it was like George didn't seem to realize that he was dying, and he was saying, it's my best friend, and he was just playing with it for so long. Meanwhile, of course, this is probably sort of torturing this thing in a way, but his intention was to be sweet and nurturing, and then eventually he realized that the lizard was not with us anymore. So there's actually in the it's like I made a little vignette of about 6 images from that day.
Oh, okay. Here are the boys again. Let me get this. Let's see if that. Whoops. Let me see. Do I have that right? The sunlight is coming a little bit through. This image didn't come. It looks okay on the switcher, but it looks a little bit in the left-hand side. But it looks like one of the boys in the photograph, which is so common for boys, right? Is he's in the bushes over there, and he may have to go to the bathroom. Is that correct? That's what it looks like to me. I guess so maybe funny. I've got too much experience with that, huh?
See, again, I didn't even think about that, but I do see that now.
Yeah.
I think he actually has clippers in his hands because he was like trimming the bushes, but he totally could have been like they go pee in the bushes all the time. So that's what it totally could have been.
Okay, here's another great photo. And is he washing cherries here, or is he?
So he was just eating them, and I mean, he's just such a mess maker. He like was sort of peeling them before eating them instead of just eating them, just put them in his mouth. So he was making a huge mess. And again, I had been hoping to get a picture of them with like cut knees or something with blood. But then when this started happening, I started seeing the juices all over his hand, and I'm like, I'm getting my camera, and this is going to be maybe this will work. Instead, so again, it was sort of intentional, but a response to the moment with the awareness that I wanted to get some sort of reference to blood. And I like that it's the cherries and the idea of sort of popping cherries and almost like they're not apples, but the idea we always associate sort of cherries with the word, not virginality, but whatever it is. So I meant it to be this kind of beautiful image, but also a little bit menacing. Again, there's this duality that I'm striving for.
That is, most photographers would ignore a shot like this, but this sets the stage for the project, which, Passing Eden or whatever you decide to choose, for your title. But this sets the stage for the project. It's like in video, they have B-roll. This gets down a little bit. You just don't always have to photograph the kids, what the kids are doing and so forth and so on. And how many kids, if they weren't putting their hands in cherries, it was licking the chocolate frosting bowl, right? Yeah. Okay, let me see here. This is, I'll get the brightness down here. Okay, this image here now begins a little bit there. It appears that in the upper right hand corner there's a shoe in the water. Is that correct?
It's actually a pair of underwear.
Okay. Okay, super.
It does kind of look like a shoe, but it could be anything.
That's my old eyes. But, once again, this is a photographer reaching out, doing something different than and putting it all together in a project form. I don't know if we saw this one in class. Did we see this one in the?
Might not have. I don't. It's always been a question mark for me.
Okay.
But I like it that I titled it "Remains of the Day," and I like that the palm trees reflect in the water. There's also like a dead worm in the left. So it's just really the remains of the day.
Yeah, it's always hard to tell, I suppose, with an audience as you do your book, whether you ask them to stretch too far imagination-wise, and some people are obviously able to do that. Whoops, let me get this, and then some people can't. Oh, okay, the grasses. I thought now, when I looked at the grasses, and there's a strand of hair in there. Mm-hmm. Is this from the boys? It okay? So it all ties back in. Back in.
I titled it "Curl" because it was a piece of hair that was pulled. My younger son tends to, during fights, pull out Calvin's hair. So.
Okay, this one here. There we go. Now, this was part of the same, but I didn't recognize any. This says tail on it. Mm-hmm. I didn't. Why don't you explain this one?
Okay, so this is actually an iguana tail, but it looks to me like a snake tail.
Okay.
And I was hoping. I mean, he was running into the bushes, but I wanted to bring in elements of this garden that are meant to be sort of symbols and metaphors relating back to the story of Genesis and of Adam and Eve, and also Cain and Abel. But so this one, you've got the serpent. And I liked that it was creeping back sort of into this darkness and that the leaves are kind of starting to decay a little bit.
Uh-huh.
They're also shiny and beautiful. So that's what that image is there for.
And finally, I've got one here that just shows the wall exhibition. As I would imagine, was this in New York, or is this the one that's on the wall? New York. Beautiful, beautiful. So talk to us a little bit about where you're going next, where we can view the photographs, that kind of thing. I think all the listeners would sort of like to know what the deal is.
So, like you said, the work, I've been just applying for various group shows. I'm also working on a book design right now with a book designer named Caleb Kane Marcus. And I also did reach out to Melanie. She was the one who taught our class, Melanie McWhorter, and I know you've had her on the show too. So, but with that class, I really decided that I wanted to make a book of this work. So we're just starting to get layout and sequencing done. And next, I'm going to start figuring out what text I want to have included. I've ordered and made a bunch of little maquette books that I hope to send out to my contacts and people that I would hope would maybe show the work. So I've got to do a bunch of self-promotion and marketing is basically what I'm saying. My work got into, I'm in the top 200 of critical mass. I don't know if you know what that is,
No.
But okay. So critical mass is part of Photo Lucida. And every year it's a big juried contest, and there's 2 rounds. The first round has 6 judges, and then the second round has like 100 or 200 judges, like a huge amount. So really you want to get to this next round because then your work is getting in front of a ton of gallery directors, book publishers, editors. You have, just a ton of people. So it's just very good exposure. And then I will also be going to review Santa Fe in October. Again, that's an application-based portfolio review and festival. I don't know if I'll be physically traveling or not. They're doing the portfolio reviews virtually, but they are having events in person as of now. And if they are having events in person, I'm definitely going because I want to go to Santa Fe and I need to hustle a little bit. So
have you been to Santa Fe?
I have, yeah. I've been to New Mexico twice, and I've been one of the trips was to Santa Fe and loved it. So I want to go back.
Is Melanie McWhorter, is she part of the super.
Yep, and she's involved. So I told her this, and she said, "Well, if you do come out, let me know."
Oh, that's great, Elizabeth. That is absolutely great. So, one of the things to and I mentioned earlier in the broadcast that Elizabeth and I were in a class on making a book. I mean, and you probably are one of the few people in the class that has really reached out and really taken this by the horns, so to speak. In other words, you've got somebody you're working with, you're getting the book published. You have any thoughts for people that have a project, they want to get it out? I know book publishing, as we found in class, can be expensive, but there are obviously a lot of self-publishing routes one can take. What are your thoughts in passing on this whole book publishing thing and getting something out?
So I think I've come to realize that book publishing is attractive to me for a few reasons. One is that I think the reason I got into photography really was to tell stories. I wanted, when I was younger, to be a writer or a filmmaker, and but I just was drawn to photography in high school, and it just became my medium of choice to tell stories. So the book really sort of lends itself to telling stories, to telling these sort of photographic narratives. And so that's one better, even showing the wall image of the Foley Gallery. I really had to constrict my choices of what to put up. And even there, I because I had a limited amount of space, I shrunk the photos down. And again, I think that the book format will help tell the story better than at least having, maybe if you have your full show in a big gallery, but they still tend to limit the amount of images. And then the second reason is that it is, at least for consumers, books are much more affordable. So it's a way to get work into people's homes, in collectors' homes. Like, you can easily become a book collector. And that's one thing that has happened since that class is I've actually spent a lot of money, too much money. It's not that cheap to actually become a book collector, but less expensive and more affordable than buying prints and putting them up on your wall. And, it takes up a little bit less space. So I like that aspect of it. I think that in terms of being on the photographer side of affording it, that is still, I think, a tricky question. And I think that there's ways to raise money for it. And I think pre-selling it basically through Kickstarter or a program like that is wise. But I think that you need to do it if you feel it can help your career and will help. And that's why I'm doing it too, that I kind of want to work with a publisher, is that I've decided I sort of want that reputation as a boost to getting it around. But self-publishing would be less pricey, and there's certainly some photographers who are really good at self-promotion and maybe have a big network already. I also feel like if you're a successful photographer and really well known, you don't really need a real publisher at that point, because people will just buy it. But if you just send it to your list, you'll get enough people who will buy it. But it's something that, and I will say, I haven't made a total decision on that yet. But again, Melanie and other, one more thing I would just say to people who are considering this, reach out to a photography consultant like Melanie, and there are others as well who can really sort of help guide you and make you think through these choices.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you do get to Santa Fe, I do, and Melanie knows this gentleman, Dan Milner. Maybe you've seen some of his stuff. He's a former professional photographer, but he's big on books. And he's an interesting guy. So if you get a chance to talk to him a little bit, he's been around the photography world and I think more importantly, he's probably fun to talk to. So and he just moved to Santa Fe. And one final question, which photographers always are thinking about. Everybody wants to show their work. And they're always looking for places to put it. I've worked with a gal in France, and she was sort of starting out, and she was initially going to put her work in the cafes and so forth, and now she's got her own exhibit going up. I haven't talked to Rebecca. We're supposed to go back there. But how did you, when you reached out to this gallery in New York City, just can you give us a little bit of that process for the photographers that are thinking about this?
Again, well, the exhibition lab is actually a unique situation too, in that it was application based and it was part of a critique workshop. So basically, you apply for this workshop, and then you meet once a month with Michael and also Eleanor Carucci, who was one of my professors at SVA when I was a graduate student there. So I knew this was sort of a good time to help me sort of flush out my project and complete it, and then get an opportunity to show it in a gallery setting. So it was sort of a win-win in terms of getting the exposure, but also gaining some feedback from the very established one photographer and the other. I mean, I think Michael actually was a photographer too, but he's gallery owner. So those opportunities, I think a lot of galleries are starting to realize, like a lot of galleries have open calls for exhibitions. And I think that is a wonderful way to get your work out there and seen. So that's what I'm doing right now. And then I think the next step is to start asking curators directly, is this something that you would show either in a single exhibit or in a group exhibit?
So so what you're saying is that once you've stuck your foot in the water and found out it isn't too cold, you build up your confidence a little bit and then reach out to the galleries because you feel confident in the work that you have.
Right. And that's, I think, right. So once it starts to get accepted into these group exhibits, you start to sort of build your resume on it. And you, like you just said, you gain some confidence. And I mean, the other thing is just as an artist, you have to learn how to deal with rejection and to stay true to who you are and stay confident, but also absorbing some of the feedback that you get and to make decisions with a little bit of that. And that, I guess, is sort of, you take the responses that you get and you balance that with your own sense of things and can carry on and push forward.
Yeah, I think when you talk about that, a long time ago I read that book, The Fear of Art. I think that's the title. And that talks about the fears that artists have, whether they're writing novels or they're doing photography or painting and so forth. It's a tough world to get around, to have your work critiqued, but you need to do it because not everybody is going to like it, and a lot of people are going to love it. So you got to, as you said, stick your foot in the water. Well, Elizabeth, I'd like to thank you very much for being on the podcast. I'm sure a lot of people will want to see your work when the book comes out. I will link up your web page, and this will appear on the Apple podcast. And it's funny about podcasts. Podcasts get a broader audience than the YouTube channel, primarily, I think, because we're not doing a lot of techno-geeko stuff, but the podcasts get a lot more hits, and so I think a lot of people...
love podcasts. I listen to podcasts so much. Like, I feel like I know people now through podcasts, and I'll reach out to them, and it's like, I feel like, I know so much more about them than they know about me, but something about listening to them talk and not hearing them, it feels really intimate, and so I think it's wonderful that you're making these, and I'm excited. I'm very honored to be a guest.
Well, I'll tell you what, when the book comes out, I'd like to have you back on, and possibly, somebody that, this fellow that worked on the book with you. We can talk about the book and push the sales a little bit, hopefully, and, get people into the bookstores or Amazon or wherever and take a look at some really good work. And I will end with this. When we were in the sort of the bookmaking class or the publishing class, and I had seen Elizabeth's work, and I didn't know. I mean, it's a Zoom class; it's all virtual. And as I took a look at this, and everybody was talking about making a book, and I remember saying to Elizabeth, whatever you do, Elizabeth, you've got to get this in some kind of book form, even if it sits on your family table, to paraphrase, because this is really beautiful stuff. And I still feel the same way today, and I'm glad you put your foot in the water, and I'm glad you're going to publish a book, and I'm sure I will be one of the first persons to buy it.
Wonderful. That makes me very happy to hear.
Okay, you take care.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Yeah. Okay.